We now move on to the final session for today, financing social protection in Pakistan. So for that, I'll invite Dr. Sohail, and I will also like to introduce Dr. Michael Thida, who's with us from the Research Hub project. I think some of you will be aware of it. So welcome to our social protection course, and over to both of you then. And while we wait, I just have two small announcements. अगर आपने अटेंडेंस अपनी नहीं मार्क की हुई अभी तक, सो प्लीज मेक श्योर कि आप हम में से किसी को अलर्ट कर दें, सो वी कैन मेक श्योर आपकी अटेंडेंस मार्क हुई हुई हो. एंड बिफोर वी लीव फॉर द डे, वी ट्राई एंड गेट अ ग्रुप फोटो टेकन. सो प्लीज don't leave before we do the group photo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So before I start with my presentation, I'll invite Dr. Michael to kind of introduce the topic of financing. Michael has a lot of experience in theory as well as practice. He's been working on various international projects in the past, still working on many, and I'm sure you'll benefit greatly from his views on any subject that we are discussing this week. But let's start with social protection financing. He'll introduce some ideas, and then I'll come to my more focused kind of discussion around financing in Pakistan. So over to Michael.
Thank you very much, Sohail. It's an absolute honor for me to have been asked to say a few introductory words. So thank you very much for having me. I will cut it relatively short because Dr. Sohail is the real expert on social protection in Pakistan and knows the programs inside out, etc. So allow me to say a few very general words on aspects that have more recently occupied my mind, particularly when working in context where there's tight fiscal space and you see a multitude of programs, mainly tax-funded programs running in parallel, etc. And occasionally the understanding of how those different programs interact and the effects on society and the perception of societies of these programs that has kept me thinking about some fundamental ideas that I've taken for granted. And in many contexts, it seems to be taken for granted that there are several vertical programs in parallel that are all paid from government revenues, etc. In the European tradition, we have some different solutions that turn out nowadays to raise very similar problems in terms of sustainability, in terms of equity of financing, etc. And the fairness of financing has been one of my areas of focus, but I don't want to confront you with any numbers or, and graphs. I just want to say a few points on the idea of social protection and solidarity-based financing. Now, the idea of solidarity is something that we have been discussing a lot in our little project team. And ultimately, what we went back to is the point that the idea of social protection is highly or deeply rooted in the idea that human beings deserve the same respect and benefit from the same rights, that implies the same fundamental rights to fundamental goods and freedoms, such as the freedom to move, the freedom to work, the right to live free of harm, and the right to participate in society, in the labor market, etc. And according to this understanding, the conduct of each person in their respective individual position ought to be judged based on the same exact general norms that must always be equally good for all. As we are in this together, that is the spirit, and our being together can only realize these fundamental rights in a way of cooperating. Societies have been able to develop solidarity, the basis of social cohesion. And in many social protection systems of Western Europe, including that of my home country, Germany, solidarity-based financing is organized outside of the tax system. The principle has its roots in the 19th century. It's basically an idea of the workers' movement in the 19th century that goes back to some earlier perceptions of solidarity in the guilds and trades, etc. It's not an invention of that often cited German Chancellor Bismarck, who's occasionally presented as a benefactor. No, it was something that came from movement within society. So what's at stake here is cohesion and the underlying of belonging and responsibility for one another that ultimately facilitates mutual support, and now back to my role as an economist, the transfer of resources from one to another. So that implies the strong to the weak, and it has become an organized form with coercion. The term solidarity-based financing does not describe a concrete model of redistribution, but it's essentially linked to a historically and socio-culturally shaped willingness to share. So to stand up for one another. And that's how, in terms of financing social protection, this can be understood to imply the idea that contributions are based on economic capacity to contribute and the benefits on individual need. Further, and this is a quote from a recent policy discussion involving the German Ethics Council, which is a committee of academics and intellectuals that reflect and publish on current affairs. Solidarity is a moral good and means the willingness to engage in pro-social actions. It is, however, not automatic and does not exist indefinitely. This is a point that we have reached, and that would be a longer digression that we seem to have reached in our societies in Europe. But what I want to point out is that this degree of solidarity that can open the floor for solidarity-based contributions to social protection needs to be explored. So an awareness of societal risks can foster solidarity, right? Be it health, employment-related risks, or climatic risks or conditions. My area is basically health. The mere existence of health risks, risks of illness in the abstract and concrete sense, as well as economic risks associated with them, are suitable to delimit the purpose of a community of solidarity. This is an idea that we have just explored in a study that will actually be presented tomorrow on people's willingness to contribute and willingness to pay for social health protection. But obviously, apart from the figures and statistics that we gather, it is essential to understand, to develop a deeper understanding of this, right? It's the decision within a society, the differentiation between private life, or maybe limited to immediate family borders, and public life, that has been a central theme of the human action since Aristotle. So with a view to the present discussions, I'm also thinking of the remarks of economist and philosopher Amartya Sen, who introduced the categories of sympathy and commitment to abstract from purely self-interested action, which is a big step for an economist, right? So societies are based on a social contract, which leads me back to the point that determining a compatible approach to sustainable and equitable financing of social protection is a truly social task. And the approach will ultimately be highly context specific and depend on cultural and obviously historically transmitted ideas and principles. And I just want to make these little introductory statements in order to encourage also the researchers among us to explore deeper the potential of solidarity within society, or the sense for one and each other, as an additional way to consider financing social protection. And I think with that, I shall also close and hand over to Dr. Sohail, who will obviously confront you with much more concrete issues than my very abstract introduction here. But thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Michael. Always a pleasure listening to you. And I think the stage is set with these philosophical underpinnings, why, you know, the need to finance social protection systems with the objective of creating solidarity, more equal citizens in a society that should be more equal. Now, I'm conscious of the time, and I don't want to kind of overstep too much. We are already at least, I think, half an hour behind schedule. So I'll skip slides, but I'll leave a room at the end of about 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You can take up any questions, any issue, to discuss that in more detail during that session. Okay, the key messages, some of these have probably already been given, but it is more in terms of Pakistan. In Pakistan, we have social protection as the basic need and right of citizens. So there are plenty of constitutional articles. I'll quote them, but there is no going away from social protection. This is embedded in our constitution as the basic right. Welfare states of the West, they make very substantial investments in their people in order to either keep them from poverty, keep them from the need of social safety nets, or if they do need those, then having those safety nets too, in order to stop people falling into abject poverty and vulnerability. Third key message is, and these are the messages, my presentation is just going to be about these messages. These are the takeaways, basically. So if you kind of deconstruct what I'm going to say, demystify it, these are simple messages that you will get at the end of my presentation. Our current financing of social protection comes from the federal government, provincial government, and voluntary and private sectors within Pakistan and international partners. So an example of voluntary sector, for instance, or private sector, we probably somebody spoke during the break time that zakat in Pakistan, for instance, government collection would be probably less than 1/100th of what people actually give on their own, right? So people are inherently generous. They believe in social solidarity. There is a trust deficit with the government, basically. They want to give zakat, they want to contribute for the well being of others, but probably not through the government, but on their own, in a way in which they are more certain that the money they are sparing is going to reach the deserving, eligible hands. Fourth message is our fiscal constraints are reinforced. So there are fiscal constraints, but they are reinforced by a lack of priority also for social protection. And I'll prove how. And the HR and systemic inadequacies that lead to wastage of resources. And finally, we need to make use of the tested and workable solutions for adequate amount reserved for social protection, sustainable also. So not that it's available for 1 year and not available for the coming year, inclusive, taking everybody along, and smart, so efficient and impactful investments. These are the messages. And the table of content is structured around discussing these messages. So why social protection? These are the constitutional provisions at the top. There are a number of articles that say employment, gainful employment will be ensured by the government, provisions for women, families, minorities, and in the brackets, you can see the article number of the Constitution. Basic necessities of life, such as food, clothing, housing, education, medical, this is written in the Constitution. This is not something that social policy practitioners have to come up with. These are already provided. We have our international commitments. Pakistan is a signatory to those, such as SDGs and all these others. We need to abide. We need to go by these commitments also. There are increasing shocks. We know we have seen COVID, floods, earthquakes. There are other shocks, health shocks. We cannot go away from social protection. I mean, if we want to live in a society that is peaceful, that is progressive, social protection, there is no going away from social protection. There is a need to redistribute resources through social transfers, not only to reduce the concentration of wealth in a few hands, but also to create more equal societies, more equitable societies, reducing poverty, reducing social exclusion, and promoting social solidarity. Now, coverage, when we talk of financing, now the most important thing is that comes to mind is coverage. How much do we have to cover? What is the breadth? What is the depth? What is the requirement? What is the need, basically? So if we look at globally, I think, again, I need to skip a few slides, but this is ILO data that currently, just for a perspective, about 47% of global population is covered by at least one social protection benefit. So there is still a long way to go. But within this broad statistic, there are societies that are doing far more. There are societies that are doing far less. I'm not sure whether you can read the text at the bottom, but the first circle, 84% is of Europe, then America, Asia Pacific, and then Arab states, and then Africa. So there is a variable coverage of social protection. Not everybody is getting it equally, understandably. Where do we stand? Let's go there. I'll skip these global slides, but I'll leave these here so you can download this presentation and go over it. Obviously, you know, there is a lot more spending of social protection as percentage of GDP in the Western countries. This ranges anywhere from 20 to 30%, but this is again for the West. Where do we stand? Now, if you see the expenditure that South Asia does on health, education, and social assistance, this is the first bar here. Whereas you can see the comparison with the rest of the world in terms of regions. So South Asia as a region is doing far less compared to most of the other regions in the world. And within South Asia, this is where we stand. So Pakistan, you can see, this is our health, education, and social assistance expenditure. Health is 0.7% of GDP, education 2.8%, social assistance 0.6%. And this is health expenditure in terms of out-of-pocket expenses. I'll skip that. Now, this is where we stand in terms of financing, basically. That was coverage. And coverage was also related to very less spending, priority less spending. Now, federal, provincial, and international development partners, just to give you some idea of the priorities now. This is UK government's budget, spending budget, public sector expenditure last year, last financial year. And this is the pie chart. This is the distribution along these various functions with these departments. And there's a percentage of this budget here. Probably unsurprisingly for most of you, these are the those functions. Social protection gets about 29% of the budget of over 1,000 billion. Next is health, then education. And let's find defense, for instance, 6%. And debt, about 10%. Debt servicing. But this is them, right? This is us. This is all public sector expenditure figures of last year. So this highest figure goes to interest payments, about 4,000 billion out of a budget of 9,500. There's no going away from it, is there? Next comes defense budget. Where is it? There. 1523 billion go to the defense needs. And then you can see these are the provincial transfers that mostly go to non-development expenditure. You know what is non-development expenditure? Running of the government, salaries, and other. And 699, 700 billion goes for subsidies. These include all subsidies. Well, some of the subsidies are universal, as you know. Wheat subsidy, for instance, anybody gets as much benefit from a universal subsidy as the other person. So typically, if wheat is subsidized, or if let's say petrol or any other food is subsidized for everyone in the country, then essentially the person who is, let's say, with disability at the lowest tab of earning gets as much subsidy as, let's say, Mioman Shah or Malak Riaz. So basically, the lack of targeting, or this is the running of the government. You cannot possibly see much in terms of social protection among the very notable, expenditure of the government. What is very interesting, however, is if you read the report of Pakistan Economic Survey, there is an annual report that is drafted by Ministry of Finance. These are the figures from the last year. So the Ministry of Finance claims that 5,600 billion rupees were pro-poor expenditure of Pakistan. Now, this is how you define the pro-poor expenditure. This is not social protection, but this is pro-poor. This is a term that they have come up with. And, this had its roots in the poverty reduction strategy papers. That was like the IMF intervention sometime back. So out of 9,500 billions, about 65% of that is pro-poor. So all infrastructure created in the country is considered pro-poor expenditure. The judicial system is considered pro-poor. If you are making bridges and roads, that's pro-poor. Law and order expenditure is called pro-poor. So defense expenditure also falls in law and order. That is also pro-poor. So going by government statistics, we are probably the most kind of lavish country in terms of our pro-poor expenditure. However, if you look at this, expenditure statement of the same year, last year, it is clear, right? 265 billion. I highlighted that year 2022-23, traditional cash transfers 23 billion, 241 billion of unconditional cash transfers, the total is 265 billion. So out of a budget of 9,500 billions, it is basically 265 billion that the agency responsible for social protection is claiming to be actually pro-poor. Anyway, moving on, come to the provincial context now. This is Punjab's GDP from the last year. This is priority of our financing, right? The priorities. Education. This is the budgetary estimate, original budgetary estimate. Share of GDP. This is the revised budgetary estimate, end of the year, right? So originally, we allocated 56 billion for education, 175 billion for health, water supply 11 billion, roads 80 billion, irrigation 27, energy 5. The next slide, agriculture 14 billion, social protection 4 billion, which is 1% of ADP, governance IT 1%, industries 2%. What is very interesting now, where I wanted to arrive at, is look at the revised budgetary expenditures. Originally, government does what it does, right? Politicians, cabinet, there are, demands from various sources. We, let's say, gave for social protection. Yeah. We gave social protection 4.3 billion, which is not huge, which is very meager, right? They returned 0.6 billion from that, which which they are not able to utilize during the year, which they thought was excessive from their needs, right? So that money was returned to the government at the end of the year because they couldn't utilize it. Governance and IT, for instance. Government gave them 6.2 billion. They returned 0.8 billion or whatever out of that. So the net expenditure is less than what was given to them. And look at all these sectors. And now look at, for instance, roads. When these departments keep returning money, then government in the planning department has to allocate that money, redirect that money to those sectors that can consume that money, right, during the year. So roads started with 80 billion and it ended with 153 billion. So when we say that bulk of our expenditure goes to infrastructure, yes, that is true, but also see the capacity of the sectors basically to absorb funds and to utilize those funds. Till the time you guys, social protection managers and practitioners, you are not able to spend this money that is given to you, to utilize it, to absorb it, how can you possibly demand for more resources? You're not even able to absorb what is given to you without advocacy. So the need to build capacity in social protection agencies to be prompt, to be responsive, to be quick, to be proactive, to be able to actually design programs quickly, and to be able to disperse amounts quickly. That capacity is lacking. Financing, I agree. Our earlier slides were about financing, how little we spend, how little we allocate. This is about what we allocate. Even that is not spent, and that is returned at the end of the year. Now, another source of funding, I'm coming to questions. Another source of funding is the foreign funded portfolio. We have a number of active loans and grants from the international agencies. We have in total of, this is dollars in millions, so $8.7 billion currently in Punjab from various international organizations. So what I am saying essentially is that money is also available through international agencies. They are interested in Pakistan. They want to go into partnerships. But where is this money going, basically? That is the, see, this is the active portfolio. This is the pipeline portfolio. Pipeline is what is coming up in the next 2 years. These are the ongoing projects. 47% of the international funding that comes to Punjab is from World Bank, then China, ADB. And going forward, ADB is going to take a much bigger role in the overall portfolio. So, meaning what? Meaning you can look towards ADB because they are interested, they are bringing in more investment. You might have heard about the $1.5 trillion project that they have come up with to cater for the flood reinforcement infrastructure and all of that. What kind of portfolio we have? This portfolio that is going on, production sector, 21%, agriculture, forest, and all these sectors. Social infrastructure is, water, sanitation. These things do have an impact on poverty reduction. But this social infrastructure, tourism, IT, environment, public finance, and 14% of this money goes to education, health, and social protection. So essentially, a small share of the entire portfolio, foreign funded. And if you just talk about social protection, it is about 4%. Mainly Punjab Human Capital Investment Project that is going on. And there's another project coming up in skills, enhancing skills project in the industry department. Nevertheless, this is a huge area which we can tap, which is there. At times they are coming to us with suggestions, with proposals, and we return them because we are not ready to go into those interventions that they are suggesting. We do not have the capacity to work on multiple projects and actually take them to the logical end. This is ADB portfolio. I'll skip that. What are the challenges? Let's go to that. Fiscal space we discussed is a challenge. No denying that. We need resources for redistribution. We need to improve our taxation system. All of that, you are already aware of that literature. There is squeezing space for donors and increasing space for lenders. So traditionally, we had more partnerships and collaborations with those international organizations or countries which were not lenders basically, high interest loans. We had a policy of not going too much for those. Increasingly, the donors are withdrawing from Pakistan, especially once Pakistan moved from low-income countries list to middle-income countries list. Right? And now we have more lenders, often at those terms which are slightly, difficult to agree without negotiations. There is less budget available at the provincial level after some recent changes of the NFC. You are aware of that. Federal government has kept more share at the center of taxes. And this is fiscal space, but about priorities, I told you, why is money going towards roads, let's say, or infrastructure? Because this is very visible. The development is visible. Politicians, cabinet, chief minister, prime minister, they know that these are those high value tickets for voters, right? So there needs to be an awareness in the general population about their approach towards government funding. So you go to a village, ask them, what is it that you want from the government? How many people are going to say invest in human capital? And how many are going to say construct this road? And roads are important, right? Road provides access to markets and all of that. So there is an economic rationale to build roads. Plus, they also get votes. So politicians would be disproportionately more interested in creating roads than going for child nutrition and health checks and school meals and all of that interventions that we have seldom seen in Pakistani policy scenario. There is low human capital development demand, and allocations and utilizations reflect this. If allocation is low, but as I told you earlier, even that allocation is returned to the planning department. They are unable to. There are inefficiencies. Finally, the resources that are in need are used inefficiently. We have a huge reliance on NSVR data, National Socioeconomic Registry, this data, and how inaccurate that could be. I'll give you a start on that. Our entire model is social assistance heavy. So it's mostly about social assistance program, very little about social insurance or labor market programs, or something that is an actual investment, a long-term investment with returns on it from. There are duplications. There is double dipping. So there is a health system fully functional. There is also health insurance fully functional, and two systems are going side by side. There are new risks, right? So this is a challenge. inflation, climate change vulnerabilities. You are aware of these challenges also. These are the challenges, some of the challenges. Obviously, there can't be an exhaustive list. There would be many more challenges. These are some of the major challenges. Fiscal space, I already told you. Priority, let me go over these slides. Performance of NSCR, I just mentioned. So BIS space, the data of BIS was only 48% of BIS transfers were reaching to the bottom quintile, which is the first quintile, bottom 20% people. That was up to the previous, based on previous data, not the latest data. It still needs to be analyzed, but they hope that this 48% would go up to 59% in the new cycle. Right? That analysis has yet to come out. So we just saw BIS was spending over 200 billion rupees. This year their budget is 400 billion. Right? So if they have a budget of 400 billion, and let's say 50% of that is going to the deserving, what about the other 200 billion rupees? So maybe that is going maybe to vulnerable people, to people in second quintile, third quintile, maybe, but not to the bottom quintile. And then there are a lot of people in the bottom quintile who are excluded from these benefits. Social assistance heavy. Just one slide will tell you that these are the countries and these are the programs that are going on in those countries, and how much these countries spend on each type of the programs in terms of GDP. Pakistan has just 2 entries: unconditional cash transfer and other social assistance, and that is pretty much it. There is very little that is so. There is very little that is available in terms of social insurance, for instance, or biggest social insurance program, so to say, the health insurance. That is also actually a social assistance program. It's non-contributory as of today. Maybe there are voices to make it partly contributory. Okay, so way forward, basically, I think in terms of our investments, this is Punjab growth strategy. These are the kind of investments that in high impact cases, Dr. Aziz Pasha made it with a panel of economists. What kind of investment or economy needs if we want to create the highest fiscal multiplier, the highest return on our investment? So these are the targets. For social protection, the report says that 5%, we are still at 1%. So we need to make our allocations more to the strategic documents that are there. Nobody reads them or goes through them. We need a better assistance insurance balance. We need to gradually move more and more people from social assistance to social insurance. So there is less burden on the government. We need to address inefficiencies for better, and these are all the inefficiencies. Let's not go into the details. We need to create endowment funds, because from the government, I know, working in the government, there are fiscal resources available at some time of the year when departments are returning their money. And then there are fiscal resources not available at all, no fiscal space in some other months during the year. When there are fiscal resources available, send them to an endowment fund, right? Build endowments, they will slowly and gradually reach a point where they can, the proceeds from those funds can sustain some of the burden of social protection. Once these funds are created, there needs to be, integration of social security benefits for informal workers through that fund. this is a technical issue, but we can discuss it, and we can also move it towards universal social protection. We need to phase out interventions over a period of, let's say, 5 years. This is an actual slide from TSPA's work. When I left the organization, I gave them a 5 years plan how to, according to the resources, plan ahead in future, work on 5 years. Some of these programs have started. For vulnerable artists program has been rolled out. Sirat Fund asset victims program has been rolled out Nayi Zindagi, under the name of Nayi Zindagi. Himmat Bazurg program, social pensions, that has been rolled out, and there are more programs. So just phase programs in a manner that suit your capacities and the financing you think would be available from the government. Evidence-informed planning can save a lot of money, a lot of resources from the wastage. Can't explain those, but if you are unable to see this slide, this slide gives a distribution of families along various PMTs in all cities of Punjab. So we have this handy. We provide, so if we see, let's say DC Multan, local government Multan asks PMT department that we need data of families in Multan who are between such and such PMT, we can give them the number and we can obviously give them the data also. This is NSCI data. And then reconciling targets with the resources. You need to decide whether you want to go for depth, whether you want to go for breadth. There are, different options. Plot all these options. Look at your resources, and then see whether you can give 1,000 rupees a month, 1,500, 2,000, and to what PMT score. And there would be a point where the two things integrate, and then you can plan that this is the kind of intervention we want to go for. Shock responsive investments. There is a special vulnerability index working in Punjab now, which invests in future risks, basically, according to the needs of the district. This is just how that index has been created. And finally, reduce administrative cost. One window, create such forums, where such platforms, physical and virtual, where people can come with their needs and they don't have to run from pillar to post in order to know what kind of benefit they are eligible for. These are the key takeaways, which are the same, which were the key messages at the start of the presentation. Thank you very much.